Welcome, everybody. We're very pleased today to have a very, very special guest, Jack Canfield. And Jack, as I know him, is a world thought leader, a spiritual guru, and we'll get into some of his wonderful credentials soon. But I'd just like to say hello to you first, Jack, and make you aware that you've agreed to be a participant in this course at Central Connecticut State University. It's been running for 12 years, or on its 13th year. It's the largest peace program in the state in any college. And it's been run by a professor of philosophy, David Blitz, and a professor of psychology, Carol Osset. So we're going to make this available. You are the fourth in this series of the four special guests that we've invited. Previously, we've had Neil Donald Walsh, who's talked about cosmology, something about why we have difficulty with religion, some of the problems of religion. We've had Steve Harrison, who's been a sort of his guru on getting people successful. And Steve talked a little bit about the spiritual aspect of selling. And then we've had Gwen Borowski, who's director of the National Liberty Museum in Philadelphia. And she deals with some of the most difficult kids in Philadelphia. They bring them into the museum, which is a wonderful museum that talks about prejudice and how we can deal with the issues of war and peace and so on. They have some large grants. They do a great job. And she talked about some of the issues dealing with children. So you've been gracious enough to come and help share your ideas about your success principles. And that's what we're going to get into. So I've given you a bit of an introduction, but is there anything you'd like to tell us about yourself that you'd like the students to know?
Well, I used to live in Massachusetts and did a lot of work in Connecticut, so I spent 10 years in New England, so I really feel a connection to that part of the country. I want to thank David and Carol and you for inviting me to participate in this, and I am someone who is committed to making the world a better place and helping everyone grow and in love and commitment to having a world that works for everyone. So I'm excited to be here. I am co-author of the Success Principle and also co-authored all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books and have used my books and my teaching and my trainings as a vehicle for raising consciousness and hopefully changing behavior on the planet.
Okay, great. Now, how did you get to where you are? I know you often say you help people get from where they are to where they want to be. What was important in your background that you started out, and what made a difference for you that you got to be this person that you are today?
Well, I was an undergraduate at Harvard studying Chinese history with the intention of going into the State Department and being involved in international relations. And then I took an elective class my senior year in psychology and fell in love with human behavior. And so I didn't have enough graduate or undergraduate courses to get into psychology school, but someone said you could teach history because that's what you majored in, and so you could enter teaching and you could sneak into psychology through your graduate work in education. So I started teaching in an all-black inner city school in the south side of Chicago and became much more interested in why my kids weren't motivated to learn than I was in the whole history thing. And so as a result of that, I met W. Clement Stone, who was a self-made multimillionaire, was worth about $600 million, ended up working in his foundation to learn how to do what he called achievement motivation. How do you motivate people to achieve more? And then I met Jesse Jackson. I was involved in his church for a while. I got involved in the civil rights movement. And so I was, again, how do we empower people who've been prejudiced against and kept down by the systemic racism in the culture? And so that became interesting to me for a while. Then I worked in the Job Corps Center, where kids who dropped out of school wanted to kind of now realize that was a mistake and they wanted to get back into the game. So we're teaching them job skills. And then I got waylaid by a teacher at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. He discovered me and thought I was cool and said, you got to come be in a doctoral program here. So I went there and studied psychological education. How do you educate people about psychological issues? We always said if it's done on time, it's called education. If it's done late, it's called therapy. But the idea being that we want to have these principles, much of what you teach and what I teach, should be part of the education program when kids are growing up, not just something we learn, in human development seminars and now on YouTube and so forth. And then while I was there, I got involved in much more into the psychological growth world. I started a growth center. It was a retreat center. I had 11 acres of land next to a 2,500 acre forest. So it was really like my whole playground. And I put on workshops, and we invited other people. We put on 38 weekend workshops a year for about 10 years there. And then I decided that I was working with groups that were too small. They were only like, 20, 30 people. And I took a course called Actualizations, where they had 300 people in the room. And I said, I want to grow up and do that. So I could reach more people and have more impact. And so I did that. And then I worked for a company called Insight, which is a more spiritual version of that. And then I left there and started my own company. And I've been doing that for the last 25 years, I guess, running transformational trainings. How do we transform people in experiential workshops? So we don't just talk to their head, but we have them experience things where they have their own aha breakthroughs.
One of my favorite philosophers, Epictetus, said, only those who are educated are free. You had an education at Harvard as well, is that correct?
Harvard, University of Massachusetts, University of Chicago, and then probably about 3,000 hours of seminars.
Yeah. So you basically had a liberal education, and in a way you were liberated from whatever you started out as a kid. Those were some really emotional or critical experiences in your life, weren't they?
They were. I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. My dad was probably prejudiced, like a lot of people were back then. We seceded from the Union during the Civil War, but there was still a lot of that around, and I was really not awake. I was just a normal middle class kid who wanted to have a nice car and date girls and be successful.
Well, that's to me, that's been so important, that we have these critical experiences. Something happens, and then it puts us on a whole different path, and then another critical experience. And you certainly had your share of those, and they've all worked out so well for you. Now, I think one of your first books had to do with teaching success, as you said, in schools, especially in disadvantaged schools. And the picture on your book, you had a beard. You looked pretty much like a hippie at that time.
I did.
Yeah, so you were breaking yourself into this very difficult environment. Did you learn something working with that group of individuals?
I did. I think I learned several things. I learned that everyone's really the same underneath it doesn't matter what skin color, what sex, where you come from, anything. We're much more alike than we are different. And that, so I think it was the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned was we're all conditioned by where we grew up. These kids that I was teaching in the inner city had never been downtown in Chicago. They'd never seen very few, they'd only seen very few white people. They didn't believe they could learn because they were being treated like that by the teachers in their school, by the culture, the way they were portrayed on television and so forth. And so I realized, though, that when I applied what I was learning, they could learn anything, and they could be as motivated and as smart and as successful as I was. And I think also I learned that they really appreciated people coming into their life. I remember one kid saying, "You graduated from Harvard. You could do anything. Why are you here? You wouldn't have done it." And so I said, because I love you guys and I care and I want to make a difference. I want the world to work for everybody. And I think that was critical for me. And I think when I went to Jesse Jackson Church, I realized how much one person could impact an entire city. He created something called Operation Breadbasket, and he was like creating entrepreneurs in the city to quit waiting for the white man or the government to save them, but to step up and take responsibility for your own life. That was a big shift for me as well.
I met someone who you had told me they were very actively involved with you in your early days, Nancy Chaconis.
Oh, sure.
And she said that when she tried to teach some of your principles in the school, she had to, it was forbidden, and she actually had to cover the window and put a sign up saying that she was doing testing so that you could teach some of the principles.
Right.
Did you find some resistance to what you were doing in the formal education system?
In the early days, I did. I think that changed. Oprah Winfrey kind of made self-esteem a household word over the years. But I think for me, there were a lot of people, especially fundamentalist Christians, who felt threatened. They thought maybe we were teaching Eastern religions, or we're going to teach kids a cult. And some people said we should never teach kids to love themselves. They should only love or love God.
Boy, I've heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when I had actually parents who were lined up with pickets outside of a school when I was doing a teacher training with, Bible verses and stuff. And it was crazy because I grew up Christian, and the Bible teaches all of this if you really look deeply into the principles that are in the Bible. In fact, when Chicken Soup for the Soul came out, I used to do guest ministries. I would go to a church and do the sermon using Chicken Soup for the Soul stories to illustrate scriptural principles. But, here's the deal, Don. Everybody is either coming from love or fear. And a lot of parents were afraid. They're afraid their children would, maybe lose their connection to God and they would end up going to hell. And I can understand that. If you're a loving parent, you want the best for your children. But when you're ignorant about psychological things and you act out of fear, we're seeing right now a whole world locked in fear. Fear, so many people are afraid of each other. And when we're afraid, we get into that fight or flight response, which goes to what we're talking about here today, which is violence and war and all of that. So fortunately, the mass media has at least made self-esteem to the point where everyone goes, yeah, I want my children to have high self-esteem, self-confidence. I want them to be successful. So I think, we've gone past that. I think one of the challenges, I've always been like about 10 years ahead of my time, whether it was health or with meditation or spiritual principles or self-esteem. And someone always has to be that point person. And, we know the person on the point's going to take a hit a little harder than other people. But it's always been my role, so I've gotten used to it.
Okay, well, you haven't been beaten up too bad. You're pretty much loved rather than beaten up, I would say.
Now, I think the Chicken Soup for the Soul books created that.
But early, it might have been a little more difficult to break yourself in, as you said, to the school.
Yeah.
It's so that we learn to crawl before we walk. We know that, and then we learn to run afterwards. And what seems to me that your self-esteem, we have to like ourselves before we can go ahead and love ourselves. It's like that's the first step. That's the crawling step, and then we learn to love ourselves, and then we can get into unconditional love. So I don't know that many people realize that how important liking ourselves is as a beginning step. It's
Absolutely.
Not, so.
I agree with that. We have to get comfortable with our feelings. And, a lot of us got conditioned that being angry was not okay. Being sad was not okay. My dad used to say, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to really cry about. He used to say, if a woman gets angry, she's a bitch, and there's all these songs now in the hip hop world about that. And the reality is we all have a full array of emotions that we need to learn to love. Some we need to learn to transcend, but we have to accept them before we can transcend them. We have to learn, become psychologically sophisticated. And I think a lot of us that judge our bodies, we judge our faces, our body weight, all that kind of stuff. The media has made, the thin model with the large breasts and curvy hips, the thing that every girl aspires to, and not everyone looks like that.
When most people look in the mirror, they usually have something negative to say about themselves instead of what would be preferable, like, boy, I am such a hot sketch. I really like me. Not many people get in to say that, but that would be a much better thing than look and say, oh, golly, I've got a little too much here, my pimples are showing or whatever. I've seen that so much in my psychiatry practice. People are always looking at the negative part of themselves.
Yes. I have a friend of mine, Janice Canfield, who writes what she calls heavy mental music as opposed to heavy metal. And, and she has a song called I Am a Hottie. I Love My Body.
That's wonderful.
Doesn't matter what you look like. And it's just a matter of like reinforcing that belief that we're all, body's like a rental car. Whether you have a Chevy or a Mercedes, it gets you where you need to go when you're trying to get there. And so our bodies are just a vehicle to allow us to get around. It's a skin bag. And so too many of us are spending way too much time worried about that instead of what's inside, which is our heart, our love, our intelligence, our skills, our talents, all of that.
I think you've sort of answered this next question, but tell me about your passion. What is your highest passion?
Well, I think it's contained in my life purpose, which is the way I define it is to inspire and empower people and organizations to live their highest vision in the context of love and joy in harmony with the highest good of all concerned. So inspire through things like the Chicken Soup stories and stories of people who have achieved goals against great obstacles. That's why we all get inspired by a movie like Rocky, or we get inspired by Mother Teresa, or, Gandhi or Mandela, whatever. And then to empower people by giving them tools like you teach as well, and to live their highest vision. And I think all of us, part of our highest vision is peace and safety and comfort, so that we're not scared. But also people want to be musicians and cooks and make movies and all that. So it's not your parents' vision, the church's vision, but your highest vision for you in a context of love and in a context of joy. We should have fun and we should be loving each other. And then I added, in harmony with the highest good of all concerned, I know you talk a lot about, both and instead of either or, and we have to include everybody, and what's a win for me is also going to be a win for you, win-win thinking.
Win-win, yeah.
And so, if you look at the meltdown that happened on Wall Street that almost brought the entire economy down worldwide, that was a few people only focused on their own greed rather than saying, well, what's for the highest good of all concerned? And so I added that after that. So that's really what I'm about, and that's my passion. I love to do that through writing, seminars, doing talks like this with you, doing, podcasts, YouTube videos, audio video products, putting on conferences, whatever it is. As long as I'm doing that, I'm happy. If I'm doing something else, I find I'm not.
Well, it's good that I think it's a wonderful passion, and I share that passion. Now, you've done something very spectacular from my point of view. You've had people write you stories, good, happy stories. You started with them yourself, and that was the beginning of Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Is that correct? So now you've collected stories for well over 100 books, different books.
We have upward of 30,000 stories at the moment that are in books.
So, to me, that's what amazing, because you have really searched the world. You've encouraged people to send you their happiest, most fulfilling, and you've collected them all. That's given you a marvelous kind of insights to so much. And I wonder if that's what led to your success principles.
I think what led to the success, well, let me just go back a second. I want to say how Chicken Soup for the Soul happened. I was running around doing workshops, and I learned early on in my classrooms in Chicago that when I was telling a story, the kids would be on the edge of their seat. When I was talking about a concept, they'd be looking out the window. And so I realized if you can embed a concept in a story, or you tell a story that has that concept embedded in it, it Velcros. It's like when you're giving your cat a pill, you put in a little bit of cat food and then they eat it. And so what I realized was this is the way to go. And I was walking around, the country or flying around doing seminars. People would always say, that story about the Girl Scout, that story about the puppy, is that in the book anywhere? And I'd always say no. And he said, I need that in the book. My daughter needs to read it. My son needs to read it. My staff needs to read it. And so I put the stories in the book. And here was one of those moments of fate. Whenever you have a book, there's usually blank pages in the back because the books are 16-page folios. And then if you don't use all 16 pages, my publisher said, you want to put anything in there? And I said, yeah, let's just write. If you have a story, send it in. Maybe we'll do a sequel. Well, here we are 225 sequels later because people just started flooding us with stories of overcoming obstacles, of love, of parenting, of health and fitness, of challenges, whatever it was. And, death and dying, all the human issues in life that are challenging, people had stories that made people feel good about their ability to overcome those challenges. And so here we are now, with books translated into 47 languages, 500 million sold, over 300 million just in China alone, where they're using the books to teach English because they put English on one page and Chinese on the other. And we thought we'd sell, some books, but never get to this level. And eventually we did set a goal to sell 1 billion books by 2020. Looks like we're well on our way to do that. But I have seen pretty much every aspect of humanity, both from my travels, because I've spoken in over 50 countries, but also from the stories we receive. And here's what I know. A mother in Paris, Texas wants the same thing for her children as a mother in Paris, France. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, you live in a tribe in Africa, or you're living over in, Russia somewhere. Everybody really wants the same thing: peace, love, joy, enough food and water, education, to be respected, to be able to contribute their gifts to the world. And when we create structures that allow that to happen, people are happy. When we don't allow that to happen, we get revolution and all the other things that create all the displacement on the planet right now that you're seeing over in the Middle East.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying from my point of view. And what strikes me is that you've had the opportunity. You said you were interested in studying behavior and learning about behavior, and who could say they've had more experience in collecting the positive experiences. How many thousands have stories have you gotten? Just did you say?
30,000.
So, no one will come close to that, I think. And so you had an opportunity to really to listen to some of the best stories in the world. And to me, that's how you've somehow come up with some great success principles. I don't know if you would agree with that, but you've really had that marvelous opportunity.
That part's definitely true. I've seen what leads to happiness and joy and success. And I've also looked at my own life and said, okay, you've been super successful. You've reached, 500 million people. You're well known. You're happy. You have a great family, great wife. You're wealthy, etc. And I said, okay, what is it that allowed me to do that? So I looked at my own life. I sat in bed one morning with my then, I think, about 12-year-old son, and we were both on our computers, and I was typing up every principle I could think of that I'd applied to my own life. I came with 114, too many for a book, by the way. And so my publisher said, cut it down, combine them, whatever. And then I interviewed 75 of the North America's most successful people, Canada, the United States, everyone from generals in the army to people that were high-level politicians that really made a difference. I interviewed movie stars, award-winning actors and actresses, Grammy-winning songwriters and singers, people that were millionaires, top salespeople, Olympic athletes, trying to see, were these principles just idiosyncratic to me or were they universal? And after interviewing those 75 people, and I've interviewed over 200 since then, I came to the conclusion they are universal. And that's why the book, I think, has done so well, is that when I wrote the success principle, people apply it and it works. Whether you're trying to, win a medal, whether you're trying to, end hunger in your county, whether you're working there's one kid I met who cleaned up the Mississippi River, literally, not the chemicals, but all the junk, literally for, 1,250 miles. And he started applying these principles, ask, don't give up, etc. And now he's cleaned up about 7 rivers. And this is a kid who never graduated college, went to high school, and was just a blue-collar kid. But now he's become, he's won the Medal of Freedom from the president, the Jeffersonian Award, etc., because the principles work no matter what you apply them to.
Well, that's fantastic. So you've been a collector. You've been a lifelong collector of things that work.
Yeah, I call myself an aggregator. I aggregate things, and I put them in a sequence so the sequence has an effect or an impact.
And someone described this as being like in the body, there's connective tissue that brings everything together.
There you go.
And there you are. Now, how does this lead into the success principles? You've got another best-selling book that's selling quite well, The Success Principles. How does all this lead to the success principle? How do they bring about success?
Well, I teach what's called a system, Don, which says if you know the combination to a lock, it doesn't matter if you're young, old, black, white, male, female, graduated from college or didn't, the lock has to open. The problem is when we think about success, most people are missing some numbers. Like we never got taught this in school. When's the last time you learned use what you learned in European history in your life, biology, or, even mathematics? We all have calculators now. And the reality is that what we really need to know is how to get along, how to communicate, how to set goals, how to manage our states, how to motivate ourselves, how to meditate, how to build a team, how to ask for support, how to reject rejection, how to build a mastermind group and accountability partner so we stay on purpose. What is our life purpose? How do we identify that so we align with it? How do we establish a vision without being afraid that it's impossible? How do we believe in ourselves when the whole world's telling us you're crazy? So what I've aggregated again is 67 principles, because we updated the book a few years ago on the 10th anniversary. And if you go through them in order, and there is an order. I always say success is doing the right thing in the right way at the right time in the right order. And so what happens is most people were never taught this stuff. If you grew up in a really wealthy family, you kind of learned it by osmosis from your parents. But most of us didn't. I didn't. My dad made $8,000. That's 8 with 3 zeros after the when I was a kid. And I worked, my way through college, graduated from the half of the class that made the top half possible. But the reality is that once I learned these principles and started applying them, my life became magical. Now I've taught them to over 1 million people live and in seminars around the world, and their lives have become magical. So they work. And it's just a matter of knowing what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And there's a sequence. And if you do it in the right sequence, see, if you have all the numbers, you do them in the right order, it works. Think about a combination lock again. You could have 3 of the 4 numbers and turn those forever in the lock. You have the right 4 numbers in the wrong order, the lock won't open. So we have to know. And fortunately, there have been teachers all through history, wisdom teachers who've been teaching this stuff, whether it was Buddha, Jesus, Socrates, Plato. These are not real secrets. You know, we have this movie in this book called The Secret, but this stuff has been known by the educated and the enlightened for centuries. So now, if I've done anything, it's to help take something that's esoteric and make it available to everybody.
Very interesting. Again, I want to get back to it in a bit, not quite now, but you've already started about how our education system might be changed. There's some things, you've given a whole list of things that have not been included in our educational system, and you've identified a number of them. And I want to come back to that. But I'd like to start addressing the key question we have for our peace group.
Sure.
The key question that I'm wondering how we can look at your success principles and ask, is there an answer to this question that I think our whole future, our whole society depends on our being able to answer this question. And the question is, why is it that we fill our world with fear, hate, scarcity, and war? Fear, hate, scarcity, and war, when what we want and need is happiness, enough. By enough, you've talked about you have to have food and so on. Happiness, enough, love, and peace. These all spell out help. H, happiness, E, enough, L, love, and P, peace. Why is it that we do that? And can we, obviously, we look around the world, we see there's 60 or 70 wars going on at any one time. We see that we're at a point where the world could, actually civilization could be over in a short while if somebody pushes a button. So what are your thoughts about this issue? And first of all, I guess maybe do you agree that this is a real issue that we're having, the world crisis?
Of course it's a real issue. We have enough bombs to bomb everyone to oblivion. We have enough poison gas to kill every person on the planet. We have biological warfare. There are literally stockpiles of this in many countries that are enough to just literally take out the whole world. So totally it's an issue because you've got a lot of people who are psychologically unstable. I think go back to why do I think this is an issue and why is it so seemingly intractable, is that we have outstripped our evolution, meaning that our science has evolved to the place that we have nukes that can wipe everybody out. We haven't evolved our consciousness at the same level. Our heart and our spiritual consciousness on a mass level has not evolved as fast as our intellectual competence in terms of the science that we've developed that can kill everyone off. We're not even talking about pulsars, where you can literally create an electrical pulse that can literally take out all the electrical infrastructure and actually kill a lot of people, make the planes fall out of the sky because all the stuff won't work in terms of their electronics and so forth. So, and we keep getting better and better at creating that. We come from this deterrent model as opposed to a model of, developing our heart space so that we can develop community of compassion. But I think what's happened is when we were evolving, we have in our system the amygdala in our brain, which is a fight or flight response that says when anything seems to be a threat, we become, we either go into fight or we run as fast as we can, which is flight, or we freeze, which means we don't do anything, usually at that point by the tiger. But the point is that used to work for us because all we had was spears and rocks and things like that, and that helped us survive. Now the technology is such that we can't afford to be stuck in that level of evolution anymore. And I think something, you sent me a wonderful book about the psychology of peace, and one of the things that's talked about in there, I loved it, was I think it was Jerome Frank. He says that we have this out of sight, out of mind mentality. And my metaphor has always been, we are a heart attack culture facing cancer. So if you have a heart attack culture, it means when you have a heart attack and you survive, everybody changes their diet, starts exercising, stops smoking because they got really wet and nailed. Like 9/11 happened and everyone paid attention for a while and tried to figure out what do we do. And there was a whole lot of love in this country for each other, which wasn't there. We slowly faded away from that. But the fact is we're suffering from a cancer. Cancer grows slowly and you don't even know it's there because you don't sense it until there's some tumor that's so big it's painful. And often it's too late. And so I think the same issue exists for us because we can't smell the nuke, we can't see the nuke, we don't hear about it that often, et cetera. It's not in the news that often. We forget that it's there and we just go about our business. And I think too, a lot of people feel like there's nothing they can do. It's too, they're too small. They don't have enough power. The government's going to solve that. One of our leaders will solve that. And we keep hoping the next president we elect will solve that. It doesn't seem to happen. So we have to change the way we're approaching all that. And I do think, and we can talk about this, that the success principles as applied to personal success can also be applied to world transformation. The same principles apply.
Now, in your first chapter of your book, you talk about yellow alerts. Yeah. So you mentioned, are these kind of things we've had enough yellow alerts to tell us what are yellow alerts as you understand in your book?
The first chapter of my book says take 100% responsibility for your life and the results that you experience in your life, meaning that get out of blaming and complaining and excuse making. If it's not the way you want it, ask yourself, how am I creating, promoting, or allowing this to happen? Sometimes we directly create it. I go up to you, call you an idiot, and you hit me. Well, I created that. If I'm standing by when some people are starting a fight, but I don't leave, and then maybe a chair falls through the air, I'm allowing that to happen because I didn't get out of the way. Or if I go over to someone and say, Don Pett's a real idiot, and you happen to hear that, I didn't really create, I kind of promoted it, And so we're doing one of those three. And yellow alerts are things that we see that are clues that something bad's going to happen. But because it's inconvenient and uncomfortable, like, Al Gore's movie, The Inconvenient Truth, it's inconvenient to change how you use the water in your house. It's inconvenient to get solar paneling instead of doing what we normally do. It's inconvenient to go get a Prius instead of a gas car. It's inconvenient, to maybe bicycle to work instead of drive your car. All that stuff is inconvenient. And so because it's inconvenient, we don't want to do it. Now I lost the train of my thought here.
You're talking about your yellow alerts? And
So the yellow alerts are things that we see them, but it's inconvenient to deal with them. So a yellow alert might be your husband keeps coming home from work late at night. There's lipstick on his collar. There was an ashtray in the house with lipstick on the cigarettes. You don't wear lipstick. That's a yellow alert that maybe something's going on. The fact that you come home from work every day with a headache, that's a yellow alert that something's not working in your life. Yellow alerts come from the movie and the TV show Star Trek, where they'd be going through the universe, and a yellow alert would happen, like something would go off, some sensor. And as long as they responded quickly, they could save themselves. So red alert meant, we're in it now. There's no way out of it. And so we have a lot of yellow alerts in terms of world peace. We see the fact that there are a lot of nuclear weapons that are missing that no one knows where they are. We see that these scientists from Russia and the United States, they're going to places like Iraq, and we see all Iran rather, and we see that they're building up nuclear stockpiles. We know that North Korea is building nuclear weapons. We see the destruction that's happening in Syria, where Aleppo has been bombed into destruction. We see wars everywhere. We see the fact that we have all these, sarin gas in Japan, and we see all the Syrians, basically gas some of their people, and we can go down the list of all the things that are happening in the world. And we see a lot of people that are certifiably, you're a psychiatrist, we'd say they would fit their way into those definitions of mental insanity. And so we get a lot of people that have delusions of grandeur, people that are power hungry, people that are, egotistical, etc., that have power or are seeking power. And we see it over and over. We see the amount of violence that happens in our streets, in our inner cities with blacks and police officers. We see the growth of all of these groups, the survivalists and the people with the open carry laws of guns in all these states right now, and the people that are shooting each other, ISIS. We can just go down that list. The increase of terrorism, the bombings that have happened in France and Belgium, and the mass killings in the United States and so forth. So it's kind of like, well, how many clues do we need that we're off track? This is called the whole universe going off course, off course, off course. We need to get back on course because, we know that joy is our internal guidance system. And wherever in fear or sadness or grief or pain or anger, that's our body's way of saying you're doing something wrong and we're not paying attention. And so it's more convenient to just turn on the TV, drink some beer or wine, watch the latest edition of, General Hospital or, Grey's Anatomy, go to bed and get up and go to work again and pretend that everything's okay. Well, it's not.
Well, you've certainly elaborated that there are plenty of yellow alerts. I mean, I know of quite a few, but I think you've outdone me, and I've spent a lot of time collecting them. So you're right on track there. Actually, Jack, I have interviewed over 200 people asking them a simple question like, do you ever wish or pray for world peace? And 100% say, of course I do, or yes, I do. Second question is, what do you do about it? You've got all these, about it. What do you do about it? And most people actually say nothing. And they also say things like, well, I'm kind to people, or I help others in third world countries. I try to contribute money occasionally. So some are clearly they're interested, but there is nothing that I've heard that is substantial that's going to really change things. It's really going to make the difference. If we had 100 years or 200 years being kind to people, might stop the nukes from coming. But the third question I asked I find very interesting. And that is, if you knew there was something you could do, would you be wanting to do something? And virtually 100% say, of course. So to me, it seems there's this pent-up energy. If we could just find a way to release it. Mm-hmm. If virtually everyone in the world is for world peace, they're not against it. They just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And now I'm putting you on the spot. You have some success principles. You have any ideas? How can we translate this? I mean, if there's going to be a success, do you have any suggestions? I don't know of anyone who's come up with any real answers. So I'm asking you something that maybe no one really has, but.
Well, I think, I began to become clear about this when I was over in the Gulf region about 3 years ago. And I was talking to a guy who works with Bloomberg Television. And we were talking about the Sunnis and the Shias. And we were talking about the fact that half the countries in the Gulf are supported by the Russians and half are supported by the United States. And the fact that both of these powers, the United States and the Soviet Union, actually want to have war in the Middle East because they get to sell more arms to those people. Something like, I'm going to make up a number, 3/4, 2/3, whatever the number was, I don't remember what he told me, of all the arms sold in the world are sold somewhere between Morocco and Pakistan. And so basically we have the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower talked about way back when after World War II, that so many dollars, so many lives, so many greedy people make their fortune off of those industries. They lobby. They don't want it to stop. If you try to close a military base in a senator's district, they'll go freaking out because they're going to lose jobs. They're going to lose money. They're going to lose whatever. So we have to first understand there are huge, huge, huge lobbying groups and huge interests that want to keep war going because it's profitable. Mm-hmm. In the military, the greatest number of advancement in rank occurs during wartime, not during peacetime. So there are a lot of forces at play that really want to sustain that. So we have to first understand how it works. We have to get clear about the game. Then we have to say, how can we help these people, these industries transform? Because no one wants to give up what they have. No one ever wants to have less. They always want the same or more. I guess it's just in the human nature. And so we've had a very interesting experience here in Santa Barbara where our friend Ronaldo Brudico, one of the geniuses I know in the world, has actually worked with the local nuclear power plant to get it to agree to shut down. And the way they did that was to figure out what is the concern of the people who own the power plant. How can we help them make as much money through solar and other things where we're generating power in the ocean with wind so that they don't feel they're going to lose their jobs, lose their displacement? So how do we help people who are committed and addicted to power and money make sure that they are feeling like they're not going to be taken out? And that's the thing. We always see them as the enemy, and we somehow want to stop them rather than seeing that they're people just like us who have vested interests, that we have to show them a better way to play the game. So that's one thing. Number two, I'm a big believer in vision and visualization and meditation. So I do believe, and there's lots of research to prove this, that when lots of people meditate on peace, that actually, there was a study done in India, 64,000 people meditated on peace for a month. And during that month, they meditated like 6 to 8 hours a day. The number of wars went down, peace treaties went up, the number of bombs dropped went down. This has all been measured. It's scientific. Even the Defense Department admits that it's true. And John Hagelin, Harvard, did all this research. And so we know that the power of an intention is the square of the number of people holding the same intention. So when we visualize peace, meditate for peace, it actually does have an impact. We then need to act on those things. And it starts local. You know, I forget the quote, I can't say it perfectly, but the guy said, I wanted to change the world. And I realized that really wasn't working very well. So I decided to change myself. When I changed myself, then my family started to change. And my family started to change. We had an impact on the community. And I started to think if I started earlier, maybe that impact on the community could have extended to the impact of the world. So things you teach about loving yourself, about self-endorsement, about, changing the languaging, a newer way of thinking, all that stuff is what we have to do. We have to work on a local level and first create peace in ourselves. Most of us are at war with ourselves. We have a part of us that wants to go to bed and a part that wants to stay up and work late. We have a part that wants to be loving and a part that wants everything. And we know that if we do that, we're going to be out there hurting other people, perhaps. So we have these competing aspects of ourselves. So first, inner peace, and that's through meditation, self-awareness, psychotherapy, all the different modalities that exist to create an internal alignment. And then we also know that when you show up as a being of peace, it has an effect around you. I think I may have shared with you once the story that when the Dalai Lama came to Santa Barbara to announce they wanted to create funding for a center for a study of Tibetan studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He gave a talk in a rose garden in a wealthy estate over in Montecito. The next year, within 6 feet of where he stood, all the roses dropped their thorns. Now think about that. They no longer felt like they needed to protect themselves against anything because they were affected by this love. In India, they talk about this thing called darshan. When you get in the space of a spiritual teacher, you change just by being in their energy field. And we know that someone like the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa could walk into a room and just change the energetics of the room. So you can become that person. So we really have to start with ourselves. And then, as you said, acts of kindness. Deepak Chopra wrote a book on peace once, and he talked about each day, 7 days a week, doing something different, meditating for peace, speaking in a peaceful way, doing acts of kindness that bring peace, creating harmony. We all should learn conflict resolution skills. How can we assist people, ourselves and others? If you can't create peace in the family, everyone's squabbling, how are you going to create peace in the world? I mean, sometimes I watch people and I think, oh my God, we can't even have peace among these two neighbors. How are we going to get peace between Palestine and Israel? But the fact is we can. Because I've worked in seminars, and you have too, where we've worked with people and helped them move through these things to create peace and understanding. I was just in Phoenix running a workshop for our Train the Trainer program where I train people to teach these principles. We had people from 25 countries. It was really exciting. And while I was watching the news, they had a meeting in Phoenix with the Black Lives Matter group and the local police force. And they got together for a whole day because it takes a while. You can't just do a 2-hour meeting in the evening. And they listened to each other. In the morning, they listened to Black Lives Matter. In the afternoon, they listened to the police. And both sides needed to hear each other. The police are scared to death out there. I mean, every day they go to work wondering will they come home, will they be able to see their wife and children again. And the same thing in the black community. They wonder, if I go out on the street, is my son going to get killed because he's wearing a hoodie walking down the street like Trayvon Martin? So the reality is we need to start listening. So learning listening skills, teaching what we call heart talks, where we pass a talking stick around like the Hopis used to do, where you talk, no one can interrupt you, because we're always interrupting each other. You know, if you watch CNN, which one of my friends called CNN stands for constantly negative news, or if you Fox News or any of these shows, they're just screaming at each other, screaming over each other. That seems to be what sells these days. No one's listening. You know, what if I had to listen to you and repeat back what I think you said until you get that I have before I could speak? That's the way we teach couples to talk. And so we have to we need to learn these skills. We need to learn how to mediate with each other. We need to learn how to create a win-win solution. We need to have crucial conversations about things that are uncomfortable instead of being politically correct all the time, but to talk about the issues that really are uncomfortable and painful for people. So I could go down a list like that, but it's called, remember way back when they said, think global, act local? And so we need to think globally. And those of us, see what happens as you become more competent, your sphere of influence increases. So at one time, my sphere of influence was 32 kids every 6 hours a day in my classrooms in high school. But then as I got more competent, they asked me to teach other teachers. So now my sphere of influence was all the teachers in the Chicago area. And then when I wrote my book, other schools started inviting me to come speak. So my sphere of influence went out to all educators in America. And then when it got translated, all educators in the world. And, you know, then you take a guy like Barack Obama, who was a community organizer in Chicago. His sphere of influence was there. He became a senator. His sphere of influence became the country. And then the president, his sphere of influence was the world. So we build up over time, but you've got to win the game at the local level, if you will, learn how to be competent there, so then you can play on a bigger stage. Most people go, well, I can't make a difference out there. Yeah, but you can make a difference here. And as you learn to do that, you'll be able to make a difference in a larger place. And you know, you've got all these tools that you teach. I have all my tools. When I started doing the success principles, you know, my first seminar was like 70 people. Now I go and I speak. I spoke in India last year to 8,000 people for 2 days. So, you know, it grows and grows and grows. And now with the internet, I mean, you see kids on the internet that are just telling people how to put on their makeup, and they have 1 million followers, you know. So we have the opportunity now to reach the entire world through the internet. The internet has certainly created some problems. There's a cover of the magazine on Time this week, as we're recording this, that said, you know, have the harbingers of, you know, why is it that we're losing the war on the internet to the people who are hateful? Because we see all the cyberbullying that goes on and the people that post things that are really repulsive and so forth. So it has that problem, but it's allowed us to reach everyone, including people in Africa on their cell phones who are just solar powering them every day because they don't have electricity in their villages, but the whole universe is now available to be reached where it wasn't before.
Those are all wonderful ideas. I'm taking them all in. So obviously you've given a lot of thought to this. And one of the things you've said is that most of us tend to think in terms of short-term gain, long-term pain. Do what feels good right now, and don't, if it's uncomfortable, then put it off. So that's a problem that I think we really have, that if people are oriented that way, they think that way,
yeah.
Then one of the things you've commented, I've heard you say that you've come to realize that most of us are asleep. We're not aware of the situation. And we are short-term thinking people.
Yes. Even on television, you look at Charlie Rose, one of my favorite TV shows, where he used to go dive deep with one person for an hour. And after a couple of seasons and low ratings, he realized he had to have 2 or 3 guests because people couldn't sustain even their attention for an hour. And if you look at primetime radio, when you're driving to work, you get like, if I were to go on a radio station, like, you know, the main stations in LA or New York, I might get 7 minutes. That's what they give you.
Mm-hmm.
So yet these solutions are not things that lead to short-term interviews or short-term discussions. I mean, we're talking today, and I'm kind of hitting the tops of, you know, icebergs here as we go along.
Each one of these things you could elaborate on. I know a lot more.
Yeah, we could do an hour on each one of these.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
but if you're only allowed 7 minutes, it's a little difficult.
hopefully you can lead them to something deeper, like your book, a seminar, a podcast, whatever. But are you familiar with the marshmallow experiments that were done at Stanford University?
I'm not sure I am. So tell me, what is it?
Okay, so at Stanford University, I don't remember what year, 60, 70, somewhere in there, a psychologist was trying to see if kids could, this idea between short-term game versus
Yeah, I know what you're referring to.
yeah.
It was other than marshmallow. There's several experiments have done that way, yeah.
So they put a kid in a room, like a preschooler, they put a marshmallow on a plate, and the researcher says, I'm going to leave for a few minutes. If you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll give you 2 when I get back. And only about 20 or 30% of the kids, when they came back, had not eaten the marshmallow. And so basically, if we could teach kids using that kind of experiment, not leave, they would leave like for 15 minutes, the poor kid, they're like looking at the marshmallow. But if we could teach a kid to do that, to sustain the short term, to give up the short term game for a longer term game, then what happens is we could actually come back in 5 minutes and give them 2 marshmallows. And little they start to learn, if I put this off, I get more. If I exercise now, I'm healthier later. If I practice 200 hits at the bat every day, in a couple of months, I become a better baseball player. And and have interviews like in the classroom. Simone Biles, who just won the gold medal in the Olympics for gymnastics from the United States, in her interview, she said since she was about, 12 or 8 or whatever, she hadn't taken a day off from practice. She'd never been to a prom, never been to a dance, never gone out on a date. She just practiced every day, 6 hours on the weekends and mornings and afternoons in school. Didn't take off Christmas, Easter, New Year's, whatever. And she won the gold. And so bringing more of that education into the value of foregoing short-term pleasure for long-term gain. There's just so much reinforcement out there now for the short-term gain because of the internet. People can get instant gratification on all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Today, parents give their children everything because they don't want them to be upset, where they don't make them earn. Like when my kid wanted to get his pilot's license at 16, I said, look, that's fine. Find out how much it costs. He went and found out it was $2,000 for all the training and flight time and the test and everything. I said, great, go earn the first 1,000 and I'll give you the next 1,000. I'll match you dollar for dollar. Well, it took him 7.5 months, but he went out, he got a job, he did all the things he needed to do. But a lot of parents, where I live in Hope Ranch, where a lot of wealthy people live, they give kids their Mercedes Benzes for their 16th birthday. So there's no sense of having to earn anything. Unfortunately, there's way too many people like that. And those same people often end up in the power structures of our world because they came from wealthy families that can afford to fund that kind of stuff. So we have to teach these principles in an experiential way, so kids learn that they get to have better things if they put off the short-term pleasure.
Well, in order to do that, one of the skills that's required is patience.
Yes.
We're not born with patience. Every child is born with a motto: I want what I want when I want it. They want instant gratification.
I want it now.
One of the success principles I would think, how do you teach kids patience? So that's one area. One of the things that, as in my expertise on what is the cause of war, what is the cause of peace, and people who are thinking about these things, some people say that, it's already too late. We're so short-term oriented, and the way we think is so embedded in us that we've already passed the point of no return. We've already built these weapons. We've got them on ready release status. Just enjoy today, just realize that we're going to end our world soon. Have a strawberry, sit back, relax, take your money out of your retirement program, enjoy it now because you're not going to enjoy it later anyway. That's the pessimist point of view. And of course, as optimists or as realists, we have to really do something to stick with this problem. We just can't give up. We've got to just keep going and realize it's up to us. So what if we can wake people up? I mean, by the way, do you have any ideas of how to wake people up? I mean, you've got 7 minutes with people. We need more time. Einstein told us what we have to do is teach people a newer way of thinking. It's a different process to teach people a newer way of thinking because our thinking is so stuck in whatever we've been doing for over 1 billion years. Animals, starting with animals, short-term oriented and so on. Any ideas how to wake people up? And then once we can wake them up, you've already given us some ideas. Maybe you could carry on a little your thoughts on that area.
Well, I think what wakes people up are several things. I think sometimes some shocking experience wakes people up. Certainly, France is a little more aware of what's going on now. All these ISIS events have happened over there. They're much more aware they need to do something than they ever were before. They're aware they need to put more of their budget into figuring out how to create peace. That people are starting to realize the reason young kids join ISIS is that they've been marginalized as Muslims in a culture that doesn't particularly appreciate them being there. They have no jobs because of the economy in France. A lot of them don't have girlfriends. And so along comes ISIS, and a lot of them have no sense of purpose because they've never been trained to have one. So along comes ISIS and says, we'll give you a higher purpose, the new caliphate. Come down here, we'll give you a gun so you'll feel powerful instead of disenfranchised. We'll give you a wife, we'll just assign one to you so you don't have to go out and do all the stuff that most normal people have to do to win over a woman. Mm-hmm. And we'll give you money, which you don't have because you're unemployed, and we'll love you and respect you because you're Islamic as opposed to the people in France who put you down. So they're starting to understand the psychology of what needs to happen as well as the security systems and all of that. So that level of understanding at a deeper level is starting to occur. I think that waking people up, it requires psychological education. I look at the movie like The Secret. The Secret became this phenomenon around the world. It was the most watched video and purchased DVD in China. They actually showed it in Iran on national television, which shocked the hell out of me when I was over there. It was shown in movie theaters in Africa because people didn't have DVD players and all that kind of stuff. So we saw a lot of people took one principle called the law of attraction and started believing in the power of that because of a very well-produced movie. The Inconvenient Truth that Al Gore put together started a lot of people on a path to ecological sustainability. We now have Priuses and Teslas and all kinds of things we didn't have before that. So I think it requires probably some people with a lot of money who are wealthy, who care, creating some films, some educational experiences. And then I think people learn most from experience. You know, we learn more from experience than we do from concepts. And so I would think creating seminars, and you've done some with your groups, and having people create circles where they start experiencing these tools working in their life to create the kind of quality of consciousness that we're talking about. There's a lot of people who are awake, and they've been awakened through meditation, through yoga, through a lot of things that have been mainstreamed in the Western world that were not 30, 40 years ago. They were all considered cultish and Eastern religionish. Now people meditate all over the place. The CEO of Ford Motor Company is a big meditator. There are people in Congress teaching meditation classes to the other congressional aides and so forth. So I think it's a mass attack from many, many angles that have to occur. We need people that are conscious, who are also celebrities, speaking to the masses. So that if someone says, well, God, if Brad Pitt's saying it, if Angelina Jolie's saying it, if, Harrison Ford's saying it, if Cher is saying it, if, all these people are saying it, maybe I should pay attention. It's the power of celebrity. And I think that's a big piece of it as well. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that. They're coming together. There's more and more people that are making movies because The Secret, said that was possible, showed that it was possible. I don't think anyone's made one as good as that yet for a while. I think some of those are important. And obviously we need to lobby our Congress people and our representatives at all levels and talk about the need for peace. For years, Barbara Marx Hubbard is trying to been getting we have a War Department, but we don't have a Peace Department. We have a Secretary of Peace. What if there were classes in peace taught at West Point as well as classes in warfare? Or if we established a National Peace Academy where people could go and get PhDs in peace studies? I don't know that exists. Probably there are some studies at individual universities, but we have to give it the credibility and the cachet that we give West Point. We have an Army-Navy game every year. It's a big national thing. What if we had an Olympics of Peace? CNN Heroes Awards, where all these people get rewarded for that. What if we had national peace medals that were given out as well as, congressional medals of honor and, silver stars and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a matter, and I would say one last thing that I think is really important. The Nobel Peace Prize has motivated a lot of people to do something more peaceful. Well, not most people that win the prize didn't do it because they wanted to win a peace prize. I do know that Ted Turner started the World Games way back when as an alternative to the Olympics because he did want to do something big enough to win that prize. So that prize motivated people. Peter Diamandis, who created the X Prize, which was the prize that they gave millions of dollars to the first person that could create a privately, not governmentally funded rocket ship that would go up and come back to Earth successfully. And they just landed one recently on a platform out in space. You've got Richard Branson and the guy from Microsoft, his name escapes me at the moment, who started it with Bill Gates. All these people, they are motivated by winning prizes. And Peter Diamandis created the X Prize. They called it the X Prize because they were hoping some family would donate a lot of money, like the Nobel family, and then they would call it that prize. But they talked about it so long as the X Prize that it became the X Prize. And every year they get geniuses together and they come up with 5 problems, and they say, okay, let's create what would be a prize to give to someone to solve a problem, like for what they called free energy that would be non-nuclear, or how to demedicalize our water. All our water has so much Viagra and female hormones and all these things in the water. Young girls are growing breasts sooner than ever because the water has all this stuff that our filtration system doesn't take out. So how can we create a filtration system that's economically viable for cities to do that? So every year they come together. What if we had a prize for like $100 million or $10 million or whatever for someone that could come up with something that was a radical breakthrough for peace? And so, if we have prizes like that around the world, like in Asia, they have the Magsaysay Award, which is like the Nobel Prize for the whole world, then more and more people would try to figure out how to win that prize. And the sextant, which was developed, all sea travel would not be available and possible without the sextant. It was actually a prize that was given by the Queen of, I don't know if it was France or England or Spain, but it was actually invented by a dentist, not and because he wanted to win the prize. And so I think that's another thing we could be doing is we could be funding. We put so much money. If we took the money from one stealth bomber and just made a prize for peace, that would motivate so many people to come up with solutions. So things like that, I think, are important as well.
I think that's a wonderful idea, but we don't do it. The question is, you have some wonderful ideas, but we're not doing these things. But it's true that if money, unfortunately, is what motivates people now. Money is something they understand brings power, and people do things for money instead of because it would be a worthwhile thing to do to make the world a better place, maybe save our kids' future if we can prevent some kind of war. So that becomes very critical. Now,
I'll make a deal with you. If you write the original proposal, I'll edit it. We'll take it to Peter Diamandis, who does the X Prize, and we'll ask him what we can learn about prizes. And then we can approach some of these people that are billionaires that are out there. Bill Gates has gotten, along with Warren Buffett, half the billionaires in America have now committed to give half their wealth away before they die. And they're always looking for places to put it. And I know there are people out there who care about peace. We could take that forward.
I take you up on that. We'll have to. I hope we can consider that a little bit more, because many of the people that I'm familiar with who are experts say we don't have much time. The most we have is 10 years, and the fact is, the end could occur any moment without any knowledge. They say when Japan, when they had their bomb, people were just doing what they were normally doing, and all of a sudden there was a flash of light, and then they disappeared. They were no more. It happened that quickly. There was no forewarning.
Right.
In fact, as a matter of fact, it was Truman who told them in advance what was going to happen, and they still didn't respond. They dropped the bomb and told them, "We've dropped the bomb. You see what we do? Will you surrender now?" They still didn't. It took 2 bombs. So we're very resistant to change. I just wanted to share something that kind of support what you said, because it's a lead that I think could lead to something. Mm-hmm. I take electric organ lessons at a senior citizen center, and they have one wall there with puzzles. Some of these puzzles are 4,000 pieces. And I said, gee, these people are elderly people. Some of them have mental limitations and so on. How are they ever going to do these puzzles? Well, they have a table set up in the room where this electric organ is. And about 2 weeks later, I see a puzzle that has 4,000 pieces. It's all put together. And I say, Mike, what's going on here? And then I realize they have the table, people from the group come and they sit around and they work on the puzzle. When that person leaves, somebody else sits in the seat and they keep working on the puzzle. So they've got this group of people. And your suggestion, we've got to there's lots of people who have some advanced ideas. If we can get them together like I understand when you publicized The Secret, there was something like 10 million people in the collective.
There were 25 talking heads in that movie, along with the dramatizations and all the other stuff. And we all agreed to send out an email with a trailer that was brilliant to our mailing list, which reached 12.5 million people on the same day.
Ah,
And someone like you might have got one from me, from John Gray, from
yeah.
5 different people. And the 5 different people who you all admired and respected said, you need to watch this movie. You went, oh, okay, I think I better watch that movie. So that's the power of celebrity and the power of followers and having followers like on Facebook or whatever to use that influence to make a difference.
You've given us a lot of time, Jack, and I'd just like to ask a few more questions, if you don't mind. Do you think we can teach love? You know, the song from South Pacific, you know, you've got to teach hate. We don't, remember the song? You've got to something. You think we can teach love? Unconditional love?
I do think we can teach love, and we can stop teaching hate. There's a great song by Nina Simone. I forget the title, but it's this little black girl, and she's singing to her mom, or it's a little white girl. She says, I want to go play with Sally. And she says, you can't play with Sally anymore. Why? Well, she's black. Well, what difference does that make? And then the last line of the song is the little girl goes, oh, I see. Be prejudiced. And so basically, kids don't see color. Kids don't even notice it. They just want to go play with whoever's there. So I do believe we have to be taught to hate. And yes, I think we can teach love in the sense that we can do exercises in classrooms and things that help people be more loving and understanding. I also think we can show people their blocks to love. Someone said recently, I forget the exact person of the quote, but it was like, it was Rumi actually, Rumi the poet, the Persian poet. He said, it's not so much about learning how to love, it's about removing the blocks to love. Because naturally we are loving. That's our nature. Mm. We learn beliefs and we get into fear. And those everything that stops forward progress is limiting beliefs and fear. It's not possible. I can't do it. It's too hard. It's never, we've always had war. We're always going to have war. It's too big. We can't solve it. There's too many people that are unconscious. All that stuff is just BS. We've seen all kinds of things transform very quickly. We got to a place where all of a sudden people go, smoking's not healthy for you. We have laws that say you can't smoke in public places. Well, that would have 30 years ago, 40 years ago, no one would have thought that was possible. But we know we can turn things around. And if we only have 10 years, as soon as we get off this call, you start right now.
I think I've already got it written, by the way, but that's beside the point. But now, could you share with us, I think your most powerful principle, I know you said you have 67 principles now. Mm-hmm. I think your most powerful principle is E plus R equals O. Mm-hmm. Could you explain that for our students?
Yeah, it's based on the fact that life is like a mathematical formula. 2 + 2 = 4. And if you don't like 4, which is called your life, what you're experiencing, if the world's out there doing 2, doing what it's currently doing, then your response to that is a 2. You're going to get 4. If you want 5, you're going to have to do something different. So event plus response equals outcome. That's what E plus R equals O. So an event would be, I put a piece of chocolate cake in front of you, you eat it, the outcome is you're fuzzy thinking for about an hour because the sugar is killing brain cells, and you put on an ounce of weight and so forth. And if you keep doing that day after day, you get obese and maybe even get diabetes. That's the outcome of how you responded to sugar. Someone else, you put it in front of them, and their response is, I don't eat sugar, and I know it's not good for me, and so they stay thin, and they're still focused, and they live longer, and all that. So think of everything you're experiencing as an outcome of how you responded to an earlier event. And so what we have to do if we want a different outcome called peace, we can't keep doing the same thing that we're doing. I always tell people, if what you're currently doing would give you what you want would have already showed up. Yeah. But it's not. And so you have to do something different. The reason we don't do something different, you've talked about it numerous times, but I'll illustrate it to everyone this way. If you're watching this, fold your hands. Notice which thumb is on top. Yeah. And then what I want you to do is unfold, and notice how that feels. Feels good. Then unfold your hands. Don't just move the thumbs up, but move all the fingers up a notch so the other thumb ends up on top. And then I ask people, how does that feel? And invariably I get uncomfortable, awkward, weird, yucky, I don't like it. What's your body want to do? It wants to go back, so we go back. And that's why we have the same old life day after day, year after year, because we're unwilling to be uncomfortable. we're unwilling to sustain, to not eat the marshmallow in order to have two. Comfortable talking to our neighbors about peace when they'd rather be talking about how to grill a better steak on their barbecue. Comfortable to study things so you can become a better communicator. It's when everyone else is having fun. So the reality is we have to change our behavior. And there's only 3 responses you have in control over: your behavior, which is what you say and do; your thinking, which is what you think, and you propose a new way of thinking, which is a big thing that everyone has to do; and then our images, the images we hold. So most people have a belief that you can't stop war. It's part of human nature. So you got to change that belief. You have to change the belief that it is possible to create what we want. It's possible to create a peaceful universe. It's possible for everybody to have enough food, enough water, enough education, whatever, to teach what you talk about: enoughness, sufficiency, instead of greed and amassing all this stuff sure that other people can't have it. Bernie Sanders really brought that to the fore in his campaign, when he was running for the Democratic nomination, that something's out of balance here. And that there's a few people that have too much and a lot of people don't have enough, but there's enough for everybody if we distribute it correctly. But that requires changing how we do things. It requires changing how we invest, how we save, how we compensate people, etc. So basically, E plus R equals O. And so we've got to change our response if we want a different outcome. Most people, when they don't get the outcome they want, we blame the event. Oh, it's that president, it's that party, it's that, the Shah of Iran or whatever. We're blaming somebody else, or we're complaining about the weather, the government, etc., instead of changing our behavior, our thinking, and our imaging. And so all of that doesn't work. And so the only thing that works is thinking new thoughts, having new images, and changing our behavior. All of which makes you temporarily uncomfortable, but this is the deal. All growth happens when you're uncomfortable. Think about this. If you're watching this, everything that's ever happened that made your life better came out of you being uncomfortable, either because you were exercising, you got that divorce that you actually needed to get, you took in a foster child and then it was difficult and challenging, but you learned so much from doing it. You went back to school, it was uncomfortable, but you got a degree and it made you better, equipped to make a living or make an impact in the world. So anyway, that's what E plus R equals O is.
Thank you for sharing that. I really think it's the most powerful principle. Now, if we have to change the R, we got to change the way we're thinking, basically, from my point of view. I personally, I won't get into this with you, but I do think we can change while we're comfortable. I think people who are enthusiastic about their thoughts and what they're doing, you're enthusiastic, you're comfortable changing. You're making change, but you're really comfortable because the way you think is one of the most satisfying things you do. There was a Yale psychologist who did a study who said the most satisfying thing we do, even more than orgasm or other things, is thinking it positive. It can also make us the most miserable thing. But now I want to ask you just a question or two about what you just said, really. If we have to change something, what advice do you have for these college students now? These are eager students. They're in a peace program. Can you offer them any suggestions? What would you like them to know? You're the teacher. What do you want them to know?
Well, I think, you've got to learn to manage your own emotional states. And whether you study things like meditation, heart math from the Heart Math Institute, where you can learn to regulate your heart and your brain so that you're in a state of love and joy and abundance and a state of forgiveness, a state of compassion, a state of what they call, what do they call it? It's a state of internal harmony, a state of where your head and your brain are working together instead of your brain overwhelming your heart. And so a state of what they call coherence. And so we need to be in that state. Byron Katie's work, I think, is really important. Byron Katie wrote a book called Loving What Is, where she talks about the only thing that ever makes us upset is our thoughts about something. Else's behavior. It's our belief that shouldn't have happened, they shouldn't be that way, or they should be another way. That's where we get in trouble with religion. We think everyone should believe the way we believe. They shouldn't believe those thoughts that they have. And so all those thoughts are creating pain, misery, separation, ultimately leads to violence and poverty and all kinds of things. So I would say, find some methodology that brings you inner peace. because until we have inner peace, it's very difficult to create outer peace. So you have to have a daily discipline of some kind that's going to allow you to do that. And so find that for you. And there's just so many tools. You know, my wife is studying Buddhism right now, and she's doing these prostrations where she goes down and she surrenders her life to the Buddha and all sentient beings living in happiness and peace. And so then she prostrates herself on the floor and she comes back up. She's done 47,000 of these in the last 6 months.
Wow.
And it's really changed her. She used to be much more judgmental, much more quick to criticize and to be, reactive. And she's now much more peaceful, much more cooperative, much more loving. And so find a discipline that helps you do that. I would say study peace. Anything you want to be good at, you have to study. Like when I started the Chicken Soup for the Soul, I didn't know anything about marketing and sales. I had to study it, take classes. I met Quincy Jones, the music producer who did We Are the World, which was a peace-oriented type thing. And he said that when he decided to do the Prince of Bel-Air, that TV show, he's the guy who was in his late 60s or something. He's now in his 80s. He went back to school to UCLA and took film production courses. And so he was studying that which he wanted to be good at. And so I would say, study peace. Every day, do something that promotes peace. Reach out to somebody in the cafeteria. Talk to the janitor in the building at school. One of my favorite stories in Chicken Soup for the Soul was a professor who gave an exam, midterm exam, and he said, 1/3 of your grade will be the answer to this question. What is the name of the janitor who works in this building? Nobody got it right. But the next day, everyone went up to the janitor and said, what's your name? And he reached out to him. So he was teaching them to care about the so-called little people. Say thank you. What if you were to tithe a couple hours a week to doing something for someone else in a philanthropic way? Whether it's to tutor some kids or to reach out to people you normally wouldn't reach out to make a difference in some way, to volunteer your time to something, so that we're coming from a place of giving as a place we're always trying to get. You come to school to get education. What if you could create something along the way? I think also I would look at doing an exercise I call the mirror exercise. You teach this idea of self-endorsement and then endorsing yourself for endorsing yourself, secondary endorsement. And my point of view is that every night, one tool that's really good at that is to look at yourself in the mirror and go through what I call the mirror exercise. You start by calling your name. You appreciate yourself for anything you did that day that was a success or an achievement. Then you also appreciate yourself for any disciplines you kept, like doing yoga, exercising, meditating, reading so many pages a day, whatever it is. And then finally, any temptations you overcame, like playing games on the internet, for 3 hours instead of doing your homework. And then you say, I love you to yourself. And if you do that every night for 66 days, you will change your relationship with yourself. You will start being more self-affirming than self-critical or self-judging. I would say every day, be grateful. Thank at least 5 people for something. And then also be grateful to the universe, to God, for all the abundance. You're in a country where you think you're poor, but there's 50% of the world lives on $3 or less a day. Most of you are buying coffee that costs more than that. So really be grateful. Stop comparing yourself to what you don't have. Start appreciating what you do have. And so just a little gratitude exercise. Maybe take 3 minutes in the morning and write down 5 things you're grateful for. I would definitely do that. And then I would definitely visualize the world at peace. So when you meditate or pray, at the end, see people interacting peacefully. See peace in the Middle East. See peace in Africa. See peace between, the Russians and the Ukrainians and the Azerbaijanis and all the places in the world where there's conflict. The Tibetans and the Chinese, the Koreans and the South Koreans, North Koreans, South Koreans. There's so much pain. But if you visualize peace, and don't just see the word peace, but visualize people acting peacefully together, that could put a huge wave of light and love in the world. So those would be some things I would do just to get started.
Those are wonderful suggestions. I really appreciate it. That's one of the longest lists that I've heard, and obviously you've given a lot of thought. The question I was going to ask, but I think you've already answered it. If you were sort of dean of the educational curriculum or whatever, and you've already said some of the things you've done to change the curriculum, the way you put in all these self-understanding and behavioral, kind of a behavioral study program. Would you add anything to what you've already said?
Yeah, if I were the dean, I would require all my faculty to watch the Train the Trainer online program. But I've created, not because I need to make another dollar, but most teachers are not teaching experientially. They're lecturing at kids. And so we learn so much more. And there's all kinds of experiences you can set up in the classroom. Things anywhere from like one-on-one sharing for a minute each. So you actually get to know somebody else and talk about something meaningful. Like, who are you? They could ask the question, who are you, over and over for a minute. Question, who do you pretend to be, over and over for a minute. And you get a lot of learning that happens in that. We do an exercise called the 9 no's exercise, where you walk around asking for something you want, and you have to say no to the request that you get 9 times. 10th person that asks you for something, you say yes. I had the last program I just finished a week ago was a Breakthrough Success program. I had a 12-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl in the training. And at the end of that, they said, oh my God, I wish we were taught all these things in school. And one of the girls at 12, we did this 9 no's exercise. And so she got a lot of no's and a couple yeses after 19 minutes. I said, so what did you all learn? She raised her hand and said, I learned to not always expect a yes. I'm going to get no sometimes. But I'm going to ask your mother for $100 add-on fee for that one, because your mom's going to be very happy to hear that. You know, kids are so entitled today. We expect to get everything, and to realize sometimes we're going to get no's, and just persevere through that. So you only learn that by doing it, not by being told that. You know, even me saying it probably won't change anybody's mind. But the reality is that there's so many things we can do. So we now have university professors that are teaching this. And I would love to see in every university a course of study called life science skills, or self-awareness skills, or self-management skills, or success skills. Call it what you want. It's a course where you get credit, because no one gets taught this stuff. You got to grow up and then go to seminars on a weekend in a hotel to learn this, and that's ridiculous.
A friend of mine, Jack, told me his son had flunked history.
Mm-hmm.
He went to summer school and he got an A+.
Right.
So he asked his son, he says, I don't understand. You got one of the lowest grades and then you got the highest grade. What's going on? He says, well, when I took the regular course, the teacher gave us all the statistics and we had to repeat them. And I wasn't interested in those things, so I didn't turn in my papers, and so on, I flunked. He said, but I went to summer school, the teacher talked about an issue, and then all the class discussed about how could we deal with that issue, and I got so interested. And of course, what a difference. It's exactly what you're saying. If you tell the story, if you get involved, it makes a difference. Now, is there any way you could suggest that the students or people who might listen to this tape can be helpful to you in what you're doing?
Well, I would really recommend you get a copy of the Success Principles and read it. Again, not because I need another dollar. But everyone who's ever read that book tells me it changed their life. In fact, I'm writing a book right now called Living the Success Principles, which are just stories of people who read the book and how it changed their life. People that were homeless, literally, someone gave them a book, and now they own their own business and are doing really, really well. Another homeless person got the book, read the whole thing, decided to do everything in it for a year. Now he's the #1 motivational speaker in the Philippines. He makes over $1 million a year. His seminars all have 600 to 800 people in them. Another kid, got involved in his local community and solved a major problem in that community. So whatever it is you want to do, I would say that you can do it a lot better if you know these principles and put them into practice. And then if you really get interested in this, why don't you become a teacher of the Success Principles? And you could do that by going to jackcanfield.com, looking at our online Train the Trainer program. And you can even apply for a partial scholarship if you can't afford it. We want more people teaching this, especially in the universities. A friend of mine named Jim Quick, who's one of the top people that now teaches speed reading in the world, started teaching speed reading classes to his fellow students when he was in college. He graduated not in debt like a lot of students have, but with having amassed a lot of money because he was charging $1,000 to these students. The parents were paying him. Did really, really well. I'm not suggesting you have to do that, but I'm suggesting you could have a thing that you could offer your fellow students teaching this, and maybe convince one of your professors to allow you to be a TA and teach this, teaching assistant. But I just want everybody, my goal, as you know, Don, is to have 1 million people teaching the Success Principles by the year 2030.
Yes.
Think about this. If 1 million people trained the success principles, and trained 1,000 people a year, that's 10 groups of 100 people, in 7 years, we'd train 7 billion people. That's pretty much everyone on the planet.
That's right.
So that's my dream. That's my big...
That's a plan. It's a plan that sounds reasonable. It's one of the only plans that I've heard that sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
I don't know of anyone who's got a reasonable plan. I don't think you do either. The politicians don't. I don't hear it.
Yeah, I haven't heard.
The main plan is to build bigger bombs.
Yeah. Well, when I was on Oprah Super Soul Sunday, I told her this. She said, you know, you set a goal to sell 1 billion Chicken Super to Soul books. You've already sold 500 million. No one thought you could do that. When I'm hearing this goal, I thought, she said, if anyone could do it, you could do it. So I'm excited about it. We've already trained 1,500 people since November, and we're recording this in August. So, now we're getting people, we've got people in 79 countries that are certified to teach the success principles. And now we're scholarshiping some people in the countries that can't afford it, like Somalia and Rwanda and places like that in Africa. But that's our goal. People everywhere around the planet teaching this in the schools, in the hospitals, in the corporations, public seminars, whatever it might be.
Well, look, you've given us your all, Jack. I really thoroughly appreciate it. You've given us lots of wisdom that hopefully we'll share. We'll make the film available to any of the students in the college, and maybe other colleges would be interested as well if we get it to recognize. I mean, what you're saying is education is the answer. I just want to close by embarrassing you a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I really think that what you have said, if you can help implement some of these, you got other people to help implement them, you will win the Nobel Prize. I don't know of anyone who's more likely to do that. But I say that for several reasons. Number one, if education is important, you have the most popular success principles. If we've got to educate people in the success principles, no one has collected and sold as many books, so there must be for a reason why people are listening to them. You have influence with a lot of people. You are in the best position to bring people together because no one person is going to be the answer. You understand that. But as you said, there are a lot of people who have advanced thoughts, and you have those kind of contacts. And the other thing that I recognize about you that I find, because I do a lot of, as I'm a sort of one of those devoted people to the gurus and try to study what other people learn. One of the things you do that I don't find others do is you're always looking to learn. You're always looking for something else. You realize you don't have all the answers, and maybe you've got 90% or 95%, but there's something more. And my experience is a lot of people, they say they've got the answer, and if you don't take what they have to say, that's one way. So I encourage you, because I'll make a prediction here. If anybody's going to really earn and win the Nobel Prize, I think your ideas really could be put together.
Thank you.
And I don't, I'm not putting a burden on you, by the way. But again, for the students and for others, I appreciate you giving us a lot of your time, and I've kept you quite a long time. So maybe we'll take a little break now. We'll end the meeting, and I'll send you a copy of this film. I suspect maybe you'd like to get a copy.
I would love that. Let's put it on YouTube. Let everyone watch it.
Okay, so I'm going to end the meeting, and then we'll try to come back in a little bit, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye.